started playing the violin when I was 7. In the beginning, 10 minutes practice a day, 15 minutes. After a year or so, a half hour, an hour. After 17 years, I was playing the violin 10, 15 hours a day. And after graduating, do I need the microphone?
No. You hear him over there?
And so I went professional, and at the same time, I heard about this thing called Shabbos. I grew up with a Hanukkah bush. So after a while, I realized there was a bit of a dichotomy between playing the violin on Friday night concerts and Saturday matinees and keeping Shabbos. So I did neither very well, actually. And at some point, my wife and I, right, it's a package deal, my wife and I decided it was one or the other. And so the violin and Bach and Beethoven and Mozart went by the wayside. They kind of like went overboard. Wow. And 17 years, right? So we sold the violin, and with the proceeds, we put a down payment on a house in Minneapolis. So fast forward, we made Aliyah 2 weeks before the Gulf War, 1991, January 1st. And there to greet us as we were walking onto the tarmac were people giving us these little boxes, gas masks. And I don't know if I was more stupid or naive, but a little bit of both probably. And so we got to Israel, and I don't know, then these started to grow. The saltwater air, I guess. And I found myself that same year buying a ticket on the day of the coup d'etat against Gorbachev to go to Uman. Who knows where Uman is? Not Oman, but Uman, right? Uman is the burial place of the great-grandson from the Baal Shem Tov, Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. And Rabbi Nachman talks, in his main teaching, talks about hisbodedus. So who wants to give me a working definition of hisbodedus? Not everyone all at once.
Introspection.
Introspection is more the Baal Tanya talks about itbonenut, but that's more introspection, kind of contemplation. But there you go. Give that man a CD. Hisbodedus is talking to Hashem, right? We have a beautiful siddur. We're obliged and incumbent to daven 3 times a day, 4 times on Shabbos. But face it, Hebrew is not necessarily everyone's mother tongue. And it doesn't exactly flow off the tongue like Shakespeare. Not that Shakespeare flows off my tongue. But, we don't necessarily know all the words and all the connotations and all the deep esoteric meanings. So Rabbi Nachman suggests taking an hour out of every day, go out into the fields. There are still fields here in LA, right? Somewhere. And talk to Hashem in your mother tongue, whether it's Spanish, Russian, Chinese, English, and talk to Hashem like he's mamish standing right there, and pour out your heart and tell him what's going on. Tati, Macarelli, what's going on? So I went to Uman that year, and I got hooked, and I went the following year, and the following year. In the beginning, there were only 2,000 people. The year that I went, the year the Iron Curtain had rusted. And to greet 2,000 people were more indigenous Ukrainians, because up until that time, Uman was a closed military city. And in fact, I recall Yidden there, Al the Yidden, that they were crying when they saw such a mass of Yidden come. They thought they were the last Jews on earth. It was so hermetically sealed that they had no concept that there was even Israel, let alone Yidden, from a Yidden anywhere. And so to greet us with more Ukrainians, and what happens when a lot of Jews get together? There's a shuk, there's a market. At that time, the annual salary was $20. And so they would bring it down, they brought down from all their whole apartment, they brought down and set up to sell us, right? Bric-a-brac, knick-knack, tchotchkes, right? Everything was $1. Good Russian boots, candlesticks, anything. I saw people walking away with accordions and clarinets. I mean, I didn't go there for that. I went there for the Yamim Noraim, right, to daven to Hashem. And the next year I went back, and the same thing, and the next year the same thing. And all during this time, from the time that I had sold the violin up until now, I hadn't thought about Bach and Beethoven and Mozart, right? The Gedolei Ador, right? But all of a sudden, I started dreaming about playing these very nigunim, Shabbos nigunim, Yom Tov nigunim. But I didn't have a violin. Baruch Hashem, I have 8 children. And Tzvat is the Rosh Tevis, is the acronym for Tzorich Parnasa Tomi. Right, you always need a livelihood. And so it wasn't in the cards to buy a violin, let alone one that could put a down payment on a house. But my desire started to grow, and every nigun that I sang, and every Shabbos miras, it was just like, oh, for crying out loud, if I had a violin, Tati! But I didn't have a violin. One year, I went after Pesach, after Passover. We were only a group of 25. I think it was about 5-6 years after we made Aliyah. And I said to myself that year, I'm going to buy a violin this time. But after Pesach, for 25 people, did it pay for the Ukrainians to come down and set up shop? No. Today, 50,000 people are there, and everything's made in China, right? But then, you know, after Pesach, we arrived, and there was no one selling anything. For a whole week we were there, didn't see anyone selling anything. And we were there, we davened the Tikkun Chatzot and Nates, right, said the whole Sefer Tehillim, Psalms. We learned, and then we collapsed and woke up again for Tikkun Chatzot for a whole week. That Shabbos was Shabbos Rosh Chodesh Iyar. And we were 25 people with our Rav Kennet from Tzvat. And we sang the highest nigunim, and my heart just cracked open. And I found myself, Motzei Shabbos, sitting by Rebbe Nachman's kever. And I said, you know, Rabbanu Shalom, what was it all for? 17 years. How many hours and hours, days, months did I spend honing, you know, technique to play the violin, and I don't even have a violin to show for it, let alone play it. And I was talking to Hashem like that. My father spent $50 a week for 17 years. Rabbanu Shalom, what a waste. For what? After about a half hour, it was pitch black, and no one was there. And I walked out of the plaza, and after a week of not seeing anyone selling anything, at midnight, Motzei Shabbos, there was a Ukrainian selling a violin. I said, this is my Eit Ratzon, and I asked for a shtickle Holtz, right? I should have asked for Mashiach, right? That was the Eit Ratzon. I blew it, okay. But, you know, I bought it for $15. I thought it was firewood. I thought it was toothpicks. I didn't even open the case. I just gave him the $15. He was drunk off his rocker. I brought her back to the apartment, and I started playing all these nigunim. Not Bach, not Beethoven, right? But Rabbeinu and the Baal Shem Tov. So the point being, everyone, you know, so often we're caught up in various technicalities of what's going on every day, in and out, up and down. Take time out. Right? Hang up the cell phones, the smartphones, the Facebook, all that narishkeit. Hang it all up. When you're doing dishes, when you're stuck in traffic on the 5, whatever it might be, talk to Hashem, because He's there and He's listening. Right? We don't necessarily get the answers we want. We don't necessarily even get answers, but that's an answer too. Right? But He's definitely there listening.
So let's hear the violin. A few years ago, we went to Rosh Hashanah in Oman. Went to Rosh Hashanah during Oman. Whatever. We were there for that time, and it fell on Shabbos, Rosh Hashanah, as it does sometimes. And they sang this following melody for Keladon. It's really an old Chadodi as well. We just were all so taken by this melody. We said, "We got to learn this melody and play it." So feature the violin.